And what we're going to be talking about today is mental health first aid. So, mental health first aid, of course, is a well-known initiative that is used within organizations. And what we're going to be doing is I'll be sharing my opinions on mental health first aid, the advantages and disadvantages, and also hopefully give you some advice and tips on how you can better utilize them if you do have mental health first aiders within your business. But as always, this is going to be a collaborative session today. So it's going to be really sort of interesting to hear your own opinions of mental health first aid as well. And we'll do that in a couple of ways. If you want to jump on the microphone at any time, as I say, just unmute yourself. I'll make sure I can see that, and you can obviously share your own opinions. But also, if you've joined these sessions before, we'll be using Mentimeter to kind of hear from you anonymously as well. So no worries, Yvonne, if your camera's not working, it's completely fine. You can either go on camera or stay off camera. It's entirely up to you. So we're going to be looking at, as we say, mental health first aid, the pros and the cons as well. These sessions are always informal, just a way of you getting out of the work for 30 minutes or so, and just a time to obviously reflect too. Can I just get a yes if this is your first session as well? So just give me a yes if this is your first session on these. So we've got Joanna is new, Glenda is new, Laura is new. Cool. So as always, I won't bore you with my full story, but I'm Paul, a ambassador for the HR Ninjas, and the HR Ninjas, I'm sure there's a lot within this group as well, is an amazing Facebook group that for me is, I always see it's getting more and more active. And I'm the ambassador when it comes to mental health and looking at mental health within the workplace. I'm the founder of Everymind@work.com. We provide different solutions and training for businesses, including a mental health support app, and partnering with over 100 companies in different industries and helping them with their mental health strategy as well. And all of the work that I do within this space comes from my own personal experience. I talk very openly about my own mental health journey of depression, anxiety, and also sadly losing my dad to suicide when I was 18. And, I share that story today quite openly. But trust me, I didn't share it for a very long time because that's what we all do with mental health as a whole. So thank you guys for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time out today. So firstly, on a chat box, I want to hear from you on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you currently feel right now? So how are you on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being that it's the best day ever, 1 being that it's not a very good day at all. So we've got a 7, we've got an 8, we've got a 7, we've got a 7, we've got a 6, got an 8, we've got a 9. 8, pretty high today, which is good to see. 8 today, but yesterday was around a 4. Was that because we spoke, Cheryl? Did I make you drop down to a 4? And just on that, Cheryl, like you say, it's 4 yesterday, 8 today. This is what is so crucial with mental health, is understanding it is that roller coaster of emotions, right? Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. But it looks like everyone seems to be doing okay at the moment. Have you had any challenges for the week as well? Again, feel free to just jump on the microphone or just put it in the chat box. And also as well, if you've had any wins. So just use this next couple of minutes to just share if you've had any challenges this week or any wins that you've had this week as well. This is typically where everyone's going to go silent as well and not share any of their challenges or wins. We've got business morale from Cass. We've got challenge, stress, forgetting to eat. I'm sure people can relate to that, forgetting to eat. Scheduling out lunch times, especially with you HR professionals being so busy at the moment. We've got doing an 11,000 step charity challenge. Today I'm only on 1,393. That's 1,393 more steps than 0, and probably a lot more than what I've done today, Rachel. I'm sure you'll get there in the end. And well done for doing it for charity as well. Lack of communication from senior team, unclear of expectations. Rosie says, I'm eating more. Zoe said a win is car past its MOT. Snacking queen. Don't judge yourself, Rosie, on that one. I'm sure lots of people are in that similar situation too. Taking my holidays, worked all week so far. To-do list is growing. Wins, connecting people, family, friends, working out, attending this webinar. Cool. So there's lots of wins, lots of negatives, but equally, as we say, these community sessions that we run every Wednesday are a part of your week if you ever want to share kind of, as I say, those challenges and those wins as well. So when we're looking at mental health first aid, we're going to be looking at the pros, the cons, and how we can utilize it more effectively. But before I share my sort of personal feelings behind it, I equally want to get some of your opinions on it too. So have you got mental health first aiders in your business? Simple question, yes, no, or not sure. So have you got mental health first aiders in your business? Okay. So half and half. So 10 of you have got mental health first aiders in your business. 5 of you say no. Don't worry if the answers aren't shown after you've submitted. You should be able to see it here on the screen itself. So we've got 10 people have said yes, 5 people have said no. Okay, good stuff. How many mental health first aiders do you have within your business? So you should just see a free text boxed here. So how many do you have within your business? If you don't know, just average it out, kind of roughly guess. Okay. So we've got none, we've got 1, we've got 12, 6, 2, 10. So a real mixture here. Looks like more people have got 12. That's slowly getting bigger. So again, this is a good example, and we'll talk about this more. You know, there isn't a certain number of mental health first aiders that you need within the business. A better question probably would have been, what is the percentage? But I didn't want to test everyone's maths and try and get you on the spot to work out the percentage of the overall workforce. But, you know, when we're looking at this, you know, I don't know the size of your businesses, but typically it differs. You know, you could be an organization of 1,000 and I've seen it, you know, they might only have 10. There's organizations of 1,000 that have got, you know, 50 mental health first aiders or none. So it really does vary. And it depends on business to business. But it was just interesting to kind of see how many you have trained within your organizations. Now, this is a big question, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Do you feel they have enough support from your business? So you've got, let's say, 5 mental health first aiders trained up in your business. Do you feel that they have enough support from your business? So do you feel those 5 mental health first aiders have been provided with enough support? And like I say, this is anonymous. Okay. Okay, so obviously this is only going to be relevant to the people that have said that they have mental health first aiders in your business. And when we're looking at the percentages, it looks like sometimes it could be better is the most popular one. So again, we're going to talk about this in today's session. One of the biggest, I guess, mistakes people have made with mental health first aid is they will train up employees in mental health first aid, and then they're signposting people to these employees. Now, the big question and the big part of the strategy that a lot of people have missed is, what are you doing to support those mental health first aiders, right? You know, if I'm a mental health first aider in a business and I've done the 2-day course, I've come away with a booklet, and now you are telling the whole organization to go and speak to Paul McGregor. Here's his email, here's his telephone number. If you are ever in crisis, if you're ever struggling with your mental health, you know, I need to make sure that I'm supported. And yes, I have my own coping strategies. Yes, I have my own potential resilience that I'll be able to deal with these situations. But equally, a 2-day course and a booklet doesn't make me a qualified therapist, right? It doesn't mean that I've learned how to detach and set boundaries and, you know, be able to make sure I'm having these conversations safely. So it's really important that businesses don't neglect this overall support for their mental health first aiders, which I say is something we'll talk about. And one of the biggest sort of pieces of advice I can give to you if you do have mental health first aiders is, what are you doing for them? Are you doing monthly check-in sessions with them? Are you giving them a safe space to come together, to talk, to, or, you know, share ideas? Are you creating maybe an anonymous sort of platform like we can sort of do here to find out if there's any situations that they've experienced or how they're feeling? It's really important that these mental health first aiders within the business are equally supported as well. I believe we found out the other day it's 3 years that Mental Health England recommend to then redo the course or do a refresher course. But you know, you only do a 2-day course, get a booklet, And then, the lack of support after that is sometimes a big challenge. So, especially the ones that have said no, they don't get any support, or sometimes it could be better. Definitely something to think about as well. What do you like about mental health first aid? This is just throwing it out there. And like I said, it's anonymous. What do you like about mental health first aid? So again, the training itself, the initiative, again, it's a very, very well established, popular intervention now within the workplace. Typically businesses have employee assistance programs and mental health first aiders. It's typically the go-to, and it has been for such a while. But I'm just interested to find out, what do you like about it? So we've got raising awareness. We've got it starts the conversation. We've got it shows the company cares. A good point of contact, someone to speak to. Training, helping my team. Access to resources. It's not HR. I like that one. Removes stigma. Educates line managers, the understanding. Proactive and reactive. Okay, raising awareness of issues. Good point of contact. Okay, cool. So again, when we're looking at mental health first aid, my biggest, as I say, advantages of it is very similar to what a lot of you have put here. Number one, it does raise awareness of mental health. If we've got mental health first aiders in the business, it's something that, again, we can obviously use to drive the conversation within the company as well. Education is another one. When we're looking at mental health, I talk about my own personal experiences. I didn't have the education that I have now when it comes to mental health and mental illness. So, when my dad was going through his period of depression, and we didn't expect it, I didn't know how to support him because I didn't have the education. My education of mental illness leading up to that point, when I was 18, was snap out of it, only certain amount of people struggle with it, and so on. So when it comes to, as we say, the education piece, it's so important that we educate people on the importance of mental health and understanding different mental illnesses as well. So, when it comes to the course itself, I think there's a real big element of education that's really interesting for employees to discover as well. And that one of, it's not HR is another one. How many times has HR been the escalation point of mental health crisis and support? So having other people and other support options within the business is going to, of course, make it easier for employees to maybe want to talk to someone different, but at the same time save HR time when it comes to mental health as well. So definitely can relate to a lot of what you guys have put in this one here. Now, what do you not like about mental health first aid? So again, in your personal experience of training mental health first aiders, or maybe going through the course, or knowing about the initiative within the workplace, what is it that you don't like about mental health first aid? If there's no disadvantages, then obviously don't put anything, but what is it that you don't like about mental health first aid? Just be interesting to see. And again, like I say, there's pros and cons to every intervention, and when you're looking at every intervention, you have to remember how individual mental health is. So for a lot of people, mental health first aid is going to be great. It's going to be the solution, but for many others, it isn't going to be the solution, right? It isn't going to be helpful for them. We've got attachment. We've got seen as an easy fix. Okay, cool. We've got don't feel qualified enough, lots of pressure on them. Now, coming off the back of some of these, that one that's seen as an easy fix is one that, is one that I massively agree with. Has mental health first aid been almost used as a tick box exercise for a period of time? Now, every organization is different. Every reason behind applying mental health first aid in a business is different, but has it been seen as almost a tick box exercise? So we can say, well, we're doing a lot for mental health. We've just invested in mental health first aid, and we have mental health first aiders in the business. So as we've got there, tick box, seen as an easy fix. So applying mental health first aid as an intervention in a business, actually, the research behind it does lack in terms of how effective it is. So just saying that we've got mental health first aiders in the business, signposting people to them, the evidence behind that is actually quite restricted in terms of how effective that is. So like we've said, when we're looking at the overall intervention, it's more about mental health first aid being as part of an overriding strategy, an overriding more holistic approach as well. Don't feel qualified enough is the other one. It's one that for me is almost a little bit scary, because if someone's done a 2-day course and they've got a little bit of understanding around maybe schizophrenia as an example within that course, and then an employee that's showing, you know, symptoms or signs of a disorder or an illness, it's really important that we make sure that the mental health first aider is safely dealing with that situation, right? And not feeling like it's their responsibility and it's them who's qualified enough to be able to deal with that. You know, mental health first aid is a great initiative to be an option to signpost people to, but mental health first aiders need to be very confident to signpost as well, because of it. You know, I share on my personal experience, and if someone puts their hand up or raises a question about, you know, how do I support someone with bipolar as an example, I will not touch that question, right? I will say, in my personal experience, I've never been able to, you know, I can't help on that. But what we'll do afterwards is, you know, come and speak to me. I'll show you a couple of resources. I'll direct you to a couple of people that I know that specialize in that, and I'll be able to help you with that in that way. If I try and answer that question from my experience, I'm treading on very sort of dangerous territory, because I have not got the personal experience or qualifications to be able to deal with that. So I think that's a big part of mental health first aid, and supporting them, that they need to know that it's okay to signpost as well. Lots of pressure on them, as we say as well, and HR not aware of the issues. So it almost staying with, you know, that mental health first aider and that employee, and HR, the business, not understanding or not knowing what's going on. Can't monitor response, incorrect expectations, having to stay positive. Attachment's the other one as well, right? You know, it takes a lot for someone in this situation to be able to detach from a crisis that an employee might be in. You know, that isn't something that you can almost teach again in a 2-day course. You know, be able to detach from a situation and someone's issues, and not take that home with you and kind of carry that burden as well. So there's a lot here that you've kind of highlighted that I can really resonate with. The other one as well that's really important, and we'll touch on, is the stigma that still surrounds mental health within the business. So the example of that is, let's say I'm using Zoe as an example. Let's say me and Zoe work within a company, and let's say there's 200 employees. Zoe could be my manager, and Zoe's gone and done a mental health first aid course. And now she is being the person that we are getting signposted to for any issues that we might be feeling around mental health. If stigma isn't addressed, if I feel judged as an employee, that if I'm open about my mental health, I'm going to be judged. If there is a lack of awareness and trying to normalize conversations around mental health as well, what changes with the relationship between me and Zoe? Just because she's done a course, I don't feel like it changes my almost fear of judgment if I go and speak to her. So again, when we're looking at mental health first aiders, we'll talk about it in a minute. One of the biggest questions is, how do we get people to engage with them? You know, and that really comes down to addressing the stigma, and again, making this more of an overriding sort of part of a strategy. Seen as a plaster is another one that, you know, I can really resonate with too. In your opinion, does mental health first aid provide all of the well-being support your company needs? So if you've got mental health first aiders in the business, or if you're thinking about doing it, do you feel like it provides all of the support that your company needs, all of your employees? Yes, no, or not sure. So it looks like we've got a unanimous answer of no. So again, you know, as you kind of probably seen as part of this, mental health first aid is an intervention that we can use as part of an overriding strategy, but it is definitely not just the only solution. If we approach mental health within an organization of, we have mental health first aiders, so we are doing a good job, we have mental health first aiders, so we're definitely trying to improve the happiness of our employees, I personally don't feel like that is going to be effective. And years have passed where companies have tried that, and still they're pretty much in a stagnant place where culture still exists, where people don't feel safe or comfortable to talk about it as well. But yeah, definitely, as you say, Rosie, it's very hard to measure. It's very difficult to measure because we don't necessarily know about every conversation that's happening and the impact that it's having too. So when it comes to questions, I've got a couple that people have sent me actually beforehand, but is there any questions that you've got? Now, these are going to be obviously anonymized, so you can just type a question in here, but there is a couple of questions that I've been sent as well. So definitely share a question that you might have within the chat box, on Menti now. I'm also going to jump back to these because there's a couple of questions that I've got. And is the online version of Mental Health First Aid as effective as the in-person sessions? So I just want to quickly answer these guys, and then I also want to hear from you if you want to jump on the microphone to share your own experiences of it too. The online version, from what I've heard, it still does the job. But I've heard from a lot of people recently that said they felt exhausted after doing it online. I believe a lot of people sort of break it down into smaller chunks and smaller sessions, and every instructor is different. But kind of doing a 2 or 3 hour session and then sort of heading back to work is a little bit different. I also believe as well, when it comes to remote engagement around mental health, my wife's in the other room, right? My kids could be in the other room. There's almost sometimes lack of engagement because we're worried about what people might be hearing on what I'm sharing on as part of that. So I do believe it's very individual. Online version is still an effective way of delivering the training, but I do know some of the organizations that we've spoken to recently are kind of waiting until they're able to do it in person as well and do the 2-day course. How can we get our employees to engage more with our mental health first aiders? On this question, I think, again, it's all about stigma. So the approach that we take, the strategy that we take, and again, I've kind of probably shared this, so I might be boring you, is promote, provide, protect. Promote is the part of the top funnel that has all of our employees, and we need to promote a safe working environment, positive conversations around mental health. So really looking to kind of tackle that stigma. Provide is the training that we then support, the tools that we then can give to our employees to manage mental health on their own. And then protect is if someone's in crisis, as a business, what have we got to do to protect them? And mental health kind of fits in at protect, but sometimes it can fit into provide as well. So when we're looking at how do we get more employees to engage with our mental health first aiders, your focus should be on promote. How can you eradicate stigma? How can you kind of address stigma so we can get more employees to engage? So, it could be the comms that you do. It could be webinar sessions. It could be people sharing their own personal experience or external speakers coming in and sharing their own personal experience. That's a really good way of kind of, tackling the stigma. It could be, encouraging and empowering other employees who might not be mental health first aiders to be champions and to be able to potentially talk more about mental health, wellbeing forums within your organization. The more that you can do to drive the conversation in the business, potentially getting a director or whoever to share their own journey of mental health and why it's important. The more you can do to tackle stigma, the more people are going to be willing to engage with your mental health first aiders as well. What's better, mental health first aiders or champions? It depends on the goal that you've got. Sometimes the combination of both probably works the best. Lots of other organizations that I've spoken to recently are also turning their mental health first aiders into champions. One thing that I dislike, and this is purely personal, one thing I dislike about mental health first aid is the first aid point. When we think of first aid, I think of someone, sounds terrible, bleeding, and then us reacting and doing some first aid on them, right? It's almost very reactive when it comes to physical first aid, and it's very similar with mental health first aid. So sometimes we won't tap into that initiative until you're in crisis. So it's very reactive. Champions, on the other hand, is more proactive and encouraging employees to share their own story and champion it in the business. So it isn't just coming from HR in the business, it's coming from other employees, and they're really pushing the conversation. So I veer more in towards champions because I think it does a lot more in terms of eradicating that sort of stigma in the workplace. But if you can have both, I think that's the much better approach. And then the final one I think I've answered, do you think mental health first aid can be dangerous at times? Definitely if they're not supported, if they aren't signposting, if they're trying to take on, people's almost mental health issues on their own and dealing with it on their own after, as I say, a 2-day course and a booklet, that's when it can get quite dangerous. But if it's treated in an ethical way, then, you know, it's definitely something that can be very effective, as I've said. We're looking to introduce mental health first aiders by asking for volunteers. How would you recommend selecting from those who put themselves forward? Really, 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 really good question. I was a part of this process for 2 companies, actually. One was a company that had wanted to do mental health first aid before they did anything else around mental health. And they put it out there and said, who wants to do it? And I think they had 1 person say yes. Then they did some lunch and learns. I come in, shared my story. I did some training and workshops with their managers about mental health. Their CEO and one of their employees also, I think, shared their story of mental health. And then they put it out again, and they had, you know, 30, 40 people come forward and sort of say they wanted to be mental health first aiders. And I was part of that process of kind of narrowing that down to 15, which was very difficult, but, you know, you can only kind of train what budget allows you to train. Volunteer, I would say, you know, they have to be, it's the balance between someone who's really passionate and driven to be a mental health first aider, you know, rather than just saying, I'm going to choose Zoe because she's a manager. You know, if Zoe, like I say, isn't that interested in being a mental health first aider, it's going to be more difficult. So they have to be very passionate and wanting to do it. But equally, there's also an element of making sure they're in a place that, you know, is safe to be able to be a mental health first aider. So that's very difficult to judge. But, you know, finding out how they'd be able to approach and deal with these difficult situations themselves, finding out how they manage their mental health, you know, finding out their own sort of personal experiences of it as well. So I would definitely look for more passion and someone who is potentially showing signs of being able to cope and deal with being a mental health first aider, rather than, as a lot of organizations do, handpick the people that are within certain, you know, management positions. Finally, I'd also probably say, if you've got a bigger organization, if it's all just within a certain department, then again, you know, that could be something you'd look to address. You might want to sort of split it up and separate it up across the business. So that's kind of my sort of thoughts on that one. And again, guys, if you want to jump in and jump on the microphone, feel free to do it any time on these. How would you suggest interacting with the business as a mental health first aider to encourage conversation around well-being? So I think that's coming from being a mental health first aider to try and encourage the conversation around well-being within the business, I believe. Yeah, I think so. With that, you know, I think it's just making your voice heard. You know, there's this top-down strategy that everyone talks about, and, you know, I'm a big advocate of that as well. Train your managers, and then everyone who's dealing with the manager, if they are equipped to be able to deal with conversations and more open and encourage conversations, then it can have that top-down impact. But what we don't need to neglect is not empowering everyone, whether you're a manager or not, to do something for mental health. So in terms of, if you are a mental health first aider yourself and you want to encourage conversations around well-being yourself, I would just make your voice heard, right? Just keep knocking on doors and sharing your sort of opinions. And like I say, if you can potentially be a part of a mental health first aid group that you meet every month, or forum, or whatever it is, you know, get your ideas together, collective ideas, and see if you can push forward with them on as a business too. I might have answered that question completely wrong, so I apologize if I've done that. I'm just going to read what Rachel said as well, because I think this is important. Our mental health first aiders are well-being ambassadors. We did the mental health first aid course as a starting point, and then the role has developed as the first cohort of mental health first aid started discussions around what the organization could do better. So I really love that, Rachel. Like you say, you know, they've got mental health first aid training, so they can be called mental health first aiders, but they're actually well-being ambassadors, which has that more proactive kind of approach to it. And at the same time, as you've said, they're kind of discussing what the organization could do better, feeding that back to HR and the business. And then you can obviously learn and improve upon that as well. So I really love that, because that's, you know, as I say, it's not just falling on your shoulders in HR. It's also, you know, more of a collective effort. How do organizations measure the engagement of their mental health first aiders? I think measuring engagement is so difficult. You know, you could potentially get your mental health first aiders to to log how many conversations they're having, but obviously not disclose on those conversations. So one might say I had 2 this month, some might say they had 3, but equally, you know, lots of people don't want to do that because the anonymous part of it is really important too. In terms of measuring engagement around mental health as a whole, it's very difficult. You know, the product that we have, the app, and the dashboard that we give to clients, you know, can prove some sort of anonymous insights into where employees might be struggling based upon, you know, their usage of the app that we use. But in terms of, as we say, measuring the overall engagement and impact as a business as a whole, it's very difficult. I would just say if you can see a real impact in culture change and people talking about the mental health first aiders and everything else, you'll start to see that it's definitely having more of an impact. But yeah, I've worked with so many businesses that sort of said, can you highlight our mental health first aiders? And on the webinar or on the talk, someone said, you know, what's a mental health first aider? I don't even know what that is. And they've been in the business for, you know, over 12 months. So it's all about, as we say, trying to make sure that it's a part of an overriding strategy, and you'll see the impacts of that too. Do you think in the future being a mental health first aider, wellbeing ambassador will be part of any HR role, or do you think having them as separate has a benefit? Again, I've seen lots of organizations that will automatically put, you know, HR through mental health first aid training. They're typically, in my sort of experience, the first person that might get put on the kind of, you know, participants list. Same with, as I say, kind of managers, because they're kind of looking at it from a way of who is going to have these conversations. There was a big campaign about mental health first aid should be compulsory in every organization, just like first aid is. I believe it was called Where's Your Head At by another campaigner called Natasha Devon. You know, for me, is that going to change much, or is that just going into, as we say, being a tick box? Because I think, as Louise said, it isn't about just having mental health first aiders. It's about the why behind why you've got mental health first aiders. And if we just make it mandatory, you know, are we actually having much of an impact there? So it might be a point where, as I say, mental health first aid is compulsory in every organization and maybe a part of the HR role. But for me, I think it's having them separate and having them across the organization is massively powerful. Like, one of the companies we work with is a construction company. And again, when you're looking at construction, you know, thousands of employees, you have to try and reach them in different ways. And not everyone's going to want to go to someone in HR, you know, so trying to have specific champions that potentially have their own story and try and encourage those conversations of certain sort of demographics is really key. Having, as we say, your mental health first aiders that are there for someone to signpost to, having HR there as well, and so on, and management all trained in, you know, mental health as well, you know, is really key. So it's about, you know, trying to get it as much as you possibly can in a holistic strategic approach. But cool, so it sounds like everyone's got some good feedback on mental health first aid too. I'm worried that the stigma sometimes attached to HR may actually deter someone from coming to you about HR. I'm worried about sharing information, effect on work security, a shame, but I think it's still there sometimes. Yeah, massively agree, Rosie. I'm sure other people would agree with that too. Stigma is the one thing that I can talk a lot about, because no one else wants to talk about it too much, you know, especially training providers or companies that are trying to tackle mental health in the workplace. No one really talks about stigma that much, because it takes a long time to kind of tackle, and there's ways of accelerating that and kind of chipping away at it. But everything that you guys are also saying, it always comes back to stigma, right? You know, just making sure that stigma is addressed within the workplace can really mean all of these interventions, and the training and the budget that you're spending on mental health first aid is definitely more impactful. Okay, good stuff. So guys, if you do want to find out more about how we can help, definitely reach out. So again, we have different services, from an app that's accessible for all of your employees that provides some sort of, you know, anonymous data in terms of where they potentially need some more support. We partner with companies, we help them with, you know, we send them comms for every key mental health day. We plan out a 12-month strategy and roadmap and all of that. So it really is, you know, we try and take a more holistic strategic approach to, as I say, try and have a big impact on your company. We do interactive webinars on mindfulness, on resilience, on sleep, on nutrition, on, you know, tackling stigma, you know, me sharing my own personal experience. There's various different sort of webinars and sessions that we deliver alongside online courses and workshops on resilience, mental health, champions, and a lot more. So there's lots that we obviously provide. We also do mental health first aid training, but more importantly, for a lot of our organizations, we do monthly check-ins with their mental health first aiders and champions from a external point of view, making sure they're okay, giving them some extra support, additional advice, and anonymously finding out how they're feeling. So we do that for other organizations. There's a lot that we can potentially offer. But if you do want to find out a little bit more about how we can support you on that, as always, just reach out to me, paul@everymindatwork.com. We'll find out a little bit more about what you've been doing in the business, and I'll hopefully be able to give you some advice that we've been seeing in terms of the other businesses that we've been working with. So guys, really appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us on today's session. Hopefully it's been valuable. Hopefully I'll see you next week at the same time as well. And as I say, the Ninjas group is there for you if you want that support whenever you need it to, up on Facebook. So thanks guys, really appreciate it, and I'll see you all next week.